pick back up this on. We will pick up this evening where we left off Sunday. We are studying Jesus the Christ. We are just going through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John as a whole. We are on the last week of Jesus, and we covered parts of that on Sunday. So we're going to pick up where we were. I'm going to ask everybody to open their Bibles to the book of Luke. Shocker. The book of Luke. But I'm going to pick up, and our first question is actually from Matthew, but we're going to look at Luke's account because I like where it's placed in Luke and how Luke has this worded. On our handouts, we're on number 11. We're looking at the widow's mite. What was the amount given by the widow? Okay, she gave 2 mites. Okay. And then our second one, Jesus was impressed with the seemingly insignificant offering of the widow over the offering of the rich who cast in much. So she cast in a very little bit, especially in comparison to those who had much. Now, what I want us to do is to look at Luke chapter 21 is where we're going to be. Luke chapter 20 is in the last week of Christ. Is on a Tuesday. It's the Tuesday of the last week. And that chapter in its entirety as a whole is about authority. There's a question, challenge him, who gave you the authority to do this? By whose power do you do this? Or by what power, what right do you do this? And the ultimate answer, if his reply is, the baptism of John, is it of heaven or of men? Now, if they would have answered that question, they would have had the answer to their question. The baptism of John was from heaven. Who gave you the authority to do this? Heaven did. That's who gave me my authority. By what right, by what power do you do this? Well, who did John say that I was? The Messiah. And so it is by the power and authority of the Messiah that I do these things. And then the remainder of the chapter there is constantly questions with regards to authority. And a parable that's spoken that emphasizes his authority. And then the chapter closes, if you notice verses 45 through 47, an abuse of authority by the scribes. All right, now, then from there, and I'm just trying to set it in a context, then in chapter 21, and he looked up. Now they're in the temple. Now, again, we have to understand where we are. When you hear the word temple, where does your mind go? They are in the temple. Where are they then if they're in the temple? Okay, often our mind may think of, the temple with the holy place and the most holy place, but they weren't standing in the holy place, certainly not in the most holy place. They were not allowed into those places. But they were on that Temple Mount, which, if you'll recall, will hold between 75 to 100,000 people. It was huge, okay? And so that's where they are, in one of these open courts, perhaps under the porticos, and the people gathered together. And so he looks up. Now, I can tell you where he is right now. I can tell you specifically, they're in the court of women. When you look at the temple, it would be in the center. Let me just use my Bible. I should have this up on the board. Let's say that this is the Temple Mount. The temple is right in the center. And you have the temple, which would have the holy place and the most holy place. But then there were walls that went around that, and there was a particular courtyard when you would walk in, and that would be the gate or the door that would open. They would call that the gate that was called Beautiful. And you would walk into it, and there was the court of women. And I know they're in the court of women because watch this, chapter 21, verse 1. And he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury. That's where the treasury was. And when you would walk into the court of women, when you would look to the right, under those porticos or under those porches, there would be these receptacles. And the receptacles would be so large, and they would come up, and the tops looked like a trumpet. Okay? And so that's how they were referred to as trumpets. And each one of these would be identified, the money that was put in, what that money was applied to. If it was wood, that was for the fire, for the sacrifices. If it was for sacrifices, if there were some coming in to offer sacrifices, they would simply put their money into the receptacle for sacrifices, and then the priest would see how much money was there. They would know that's how many sacrifices were to be offered, and they would be offered that morning, that evening. And so they are in the court of women. And Jesus looks up, and it's called the court of women because that's as far as the women could go. Men and women could populate that area, but the women could not go any further. But their gifts, they were casting their gifts into the treasury. And he saw also a certain poor widow casting in thither 2 mites. And he said, of a truth I say unto you, this poor widow had cast in more than they all. Now, if you saw somebody put in about $1,000 as opposed to, let's say, $2, who would you say gave the most? You know, I'm looking at the $1,000. She didn't give anything in comparison to, until you understand the situation. Notice, for all these have of their abundance cast into the offerings of God. Okay, does anyone have it worded differently than abundance?
Surplus.
That's it. Their surplus. I wonder how many of us, whenever we are looking at our budget, we have everything lined up, and then at the bottom, we have our giving. And hey, here's what I've got left. Here's the surplus. Here's what I've got left over. Well, out of that, I'll give. I have a feeling this lady didn't have a budget. In fact, notice it says, but she of her, the old King James says, penury. Anybody have a different word than that? Poverty. And that really doesn't give the very clear picture. The pictures is of extreme poverty. One who would have to have assistance even from day to day. And so where these who were giving these large sums, it was based off of, here's the surplus that I have left over, so out of that I will give. They never felt anything. It didn't faze them. It wasn't really a sacrifice. This lady gave out of her poverty. In other words, she gave everything that she had. She gave even when she didn't have to give. And so Jesus praised her for that. Okay, James?
You know, this doesn't have a biblical reference, but me and my son talked about it. He looked at numbers of people that are really rich in this world. And sometimes we don't have a very good idea of how to place people that are very rich. We're all very well, we do very well in this, but you're talking about the 500 million and above billionaires that are in the world. You think about the extravagance that they go out and they purchase things. And when you actually do the numbers about what it costs them, the equivalence of just someone like us that do meagerly well, we do pretty well in the world. When you compare one of them to us, they can go out and buy a $200,000 high-end sports car. And it's basically like me or you buying a pack of gum. Okay? And we do pretty well, but when you start to put into context this, they put in out of their abundance those that were well-to-do in the Jewish society. They had not only much more, but so much more than this woman. And this woman probably was having a hard time feeding herself. And it really, it kind of puts into perspective when you actually put some real numbers in our heads, the comparisons of money that they had. She couldn't go to McDonald's and buy a Happy Meal, but these guys could go out and buy a Bugatti and just trash it and get a new one next week.
Here's a challenge for all of us. the next time we're looking at our budget, look at what we have set aside for our giving in comparison to the outgoing of other things, and see percentage-wise how that compares. In other words, how much a month is outgoing to cell phones? How much a month is going to the work of the Lord? What's the comparison there? And you could look at every expense item that you have and say, okay, where then have I, especially those expenses that are luxury expenses. In other words, they're not needed, but I've chosen to take these on. And in comparison to, that might be a good way for us to make a comparison and maybe an application here. All right, anything else with regards to this widow? All right, let's go to the book of Matthew, is our next text here, Matthew chapter 24. And I don't know how much of this we want to cover, but we'll cover whatever anybody wants to look at. The second coming, and there's a question mark there. The second coming. Now, Matthew 24 does deal with the second coming, but by and large, it's not dealing with the second coming. It's dealing with the destruction of Jerusalem. All right. The meaning of signs in Matthew chapter 24, and it has a special reference for us, verses 32 and 33. What were the purposes of the signs? What were the signs that we read of in Matthew chapter 24 pointing to? I've really already told you what they are. Okay, let's read Matthew chapter 24, okay? Let's start where these signs begin. Verse 4. Jesus answered and said unto them, Take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. And ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Now, let me go ahead, and here's a spoiler alert. What we're going to see in these signs are pointing to the destruction of Jerusalem by the Roman armies. Okay, now we're gonna verify that as we go, but I want that out front so I can kind of make some comments as we read. Ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. Well, in about the year 65, 66, the Emperor Nero committed suicide, and then in a year there were four that served as emperors. There was Galba, Otho, Vitellius, and then ultimately Vespasian. And there were wars and there were civil wars going on. The military each trying to get their man in a particular position. Vespasian and Titus had already come down and they were marching, taking various cities, fenced cities of Judea. They were coming from the south, they were coming from the north. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines. Luke chapter 11, we read of a famine in the time of Claudius. This certainly was after the time of Christ. Also, Josephus noted that there were no less than 4 famines during the time of Claudius, some more severe than others. Pestilences, earthquakes in diverse places. All these are the beginnings of sorrows. Then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted and shall kill you. Were any of the apostles killed? Who is Jesus talking to here? He's talking specifically to his apostles here, and really just a select number of the apostles. Acts chapter 12, James is put to death. The death of the other apostles, we only know by secular history, and those are not certain how they died. Nevertheless, it would seem that they were martyred. Ye shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake, and then shall many be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise and deceive many, and because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Because of sin, because of iniquity, these false teachers coming, the love of many for Christ shall wax cold. What happens when somebody's love for Christ begins to temper a little bit? What are some things that you start to see? I mean, don't take it out of this time and put it in our time.
they stop doing those things to help each other out.
Okay. All right. So the love of many, even for each other, would wax cold. Let's say that the church is assembled together on Sunday, and folks have been concerned about one particular brother. They can see that his faith is starting to weaken. They can see that his love for Christ is beginning to grow cold. What's liable to happen with that brother? What's going to happen come one Sunday? He's not going to be there. Okay, now just make a little check mark in your mind of Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together as a manner of some is, but exhorting one another, so much the more as ye see the day approaching. Are we going to see the return of Christ approaching? Well, he comes as a thief in the night. Is that talking about the Lord's day? If it's talking about the Lord's day, that I'm to exhort each of you more as I see the day approaching, well, then Monday I should reach out to you one time and say, hey, be sure to be there Sunday. Tuesday you're going to hear from me twice. Wednesday 3 times. It's not talking about Sunday. There's a reference there to that time of the destruction that's coming. But when the love of some would wax cold, they're not going to assemble themselves together. As the manner of some is, they'll forsake that assembly. And Jesus is foretelling of these things. But he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. Saved from what? From this judgment that's coming on the nation. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken by Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Is this the second coming? Why would some go flee into the mountains if Christ is going to... What's going to happen when Christ returns? Everything will be dissolved. 2 Peter chapter 3, beginning with verse 10. It's not going to be any flee into the mountains. And we'll be changed in how quickly? In the twinkling of an eye. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Don't come down and go into the house and say, I've got to pack up. Get out. Why? Because when that Roman army gets there, there is no getting out. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. Just don't go back home. Now, here's a question. Why would the Lord be giving this exhortation to the Jews? Hey, whenever you see these signs and you know that the time of destruction, of God's judgment, and he's talking about on Jerusalem is coming, why would he say, don't go into Jerusalem? Would it not make sense not to go to Jerusalem if the Roman army's coming? Here's a question. What city would you go to? Which is the most defensed city? Which is the city that has the greatest wall? Which is the city that's ready to defend itself? Jerusalem. And so the thought is going to be, as here comes the Roman army taking these smaller fenced cities and these smaller villages, we've got to get to Jerusalem so we can be defended. Jesus said, don't do that, because that city will not stand. Verse 19, and woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. Why? Which would be easier, to be in a period of flight for safety with little children or without little children? Alex, my daughter, texted me the other day. Her and Jesse are coming down. They're going to be flying out, going to South Carolina, I believe, for a couple of days and coming back. And they're taking Joyful, who's about 2. Well, she'll be 3 come February, and Will, who's not quite 1. And I thought, y'all don't know what you're getting into with those 2 little ones getting on a flight like that. It'll work. You can do it, but it's not going to be like just 2 people going. Imagine if you're fleeing for your life. Okay, not only that, but pray, verse 20, pray ye that your flight be not in the winter. Well, why not? Well, it's not conducive for flight. Neither on the Sabbath day. What happens on the Sabbath day? You can't get out of the city because the gate's closed. For then shall be great tribulation, which was not since the beginning of the world to this time, nor ever shall be. And except those days should be shortened, there should be no flesh saved, but for the elect's sake those days shall be shortened. It is told by ancient historians that the Roman armies, they came in at one time, but then their armies backed up. And it allowed some who were in the city to get out. Then if any man shall say unto you, Lo, here is Christ, or there, believe it not. Wouldn't it be great? Luke speaks of there's going to come a time when you would desire to see one of the days of the Son of Man. As I look around, I know there are some here who have buried their parents. Have you ever thought to yourself, man, I wish I could just talk to my daddy? You know, if it was in a time of great severity, especially in that day and age, and someone said, we found the Christ, he's here. Don't be deceived and think that the Christ has come back. Okay? He's given the warning. Verse 24, for there shall arise false Christs and false prophets, and shall show great signs and wonders, insomuch that if it were possible, they shall deceive the very elect. Behold, I've told you before. Wherefore, if they shall say unto you, behold, he's in the desert, go not forth. Behold, he is in the secret chambers, believe it not. And now he's going to make a point. When I come, you won't have to have anybody tell you, because you'll know it. Watch this. For as the lightning cometh out of the east and shineth unto the west. If you're standing outside and lightning flashes across the sky, does somebody have to say, look, there's lightning? You see it, okay? Shineth even unto the west, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For wheresoever the carcass is, there shall the eagles be gathered together. Does anybody have something other than eagles? Vultures. What do vultures do? You know, you don't see eagles gathered together, number one. This should be vultures. You see vultures gathered together like buzzards. Well, what do vultures do? When they're gathered together, what are they doing? They're feeding on the dead. Okay, the picture here is, wheresoever the carcass is, there shall the eagles be gathered together. Wheresoever judgment is to be, there will I be. It's universal. Okay, it's not going to be local as what he's talking about here with Jerusalem. Now, verse 29. Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened. The picture here is figurative language. I wish we had time. We'd go back and look in the Old Testament and in the prophets. And the picture, you ever have a bad day? Think about the worst day you ever had. Could you say that it was a dark day? Could you say maybe that day was so dark that the sun refused to shine? Immediately after the tribulation of those days shall the sun be darkened, the moon shall not give her light, the stars shall fall from the heaven, the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn. All right, when you hear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, you picture judgment. This isn't final judgment, but it is a judgment, and it's a judgment of God against the Jews, against Jerusalem. All tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. It's judgment that's coming, but it's not final judgment. You say, how it says he's coming in the clouds? It's being used figuratively. It's look at the verse prior to. The sun shall be darkened, the moon not give her light, the stars fall from heaven. That's all figurative language. And verse 30 also is figurative language. Now I'm going to show you how we know that for sure shortly, that's not the second coming. And he shall send his angels with the great sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now, verse 32 and 33, learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know that summer is nigh. You know, back in Tennessee, at a certain time of the year of the spring, the dogwood trees would begin to bloom. And you know what I knew when those dogwood trees started to bloom? Me and my daddy fishing to go catch some crappie. Because when those dogwood trees started to bloom, man, the fishing was great on Reelfoot Lake for some crappie. I know we would catch some slabs. And there's certain things in nature, when you start to see certain things, you know, okay, this is about to take place. The change of the seasons, and this is going to happen, and this is going to happen. And this is what he's saying here. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, you know summer is nigh. So likewise, when you shall see all these things, know ye that it is near, even at the doors. When you start to see all these signs, know that what I'm telling you, this judgment, know that it's near and that it's coming. How is Jesus coming? With signs? As a thief in the night. 2 Peter chapter 3. Watch this, verse 34. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass. What generation? The generation to whom Jesus was speaking. This generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled. That's including verse 30, where it said the Son of Man. You'll see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven. That was figurative of a judgment, not literal of final judgment. If it was literal of final judgment, then he came, because he said that generation of his day would not pass till all those things be fulfilled. Now, let's keep reading. Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my word shall not pass away. In other words, you can take what I say to the bank. But of that day and hour, now there were multiple questions asked at the beginning of this. What about this temple? You say it's going to be destroyed. When's that going to happen? And what about the sign of your return? Well, he answers these questions in turn. Now he's going to answer about his return, his coming again. But of that day and hour of his return knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. What was it like in the days of Noah? You know, I used to think when I was growing up, man, whenever that rain started to come, you'd think those folks would have took off running to the ark because they saw the black cloud coming up. But I don't believe that's how it was. It was sudden. It never had rain before. I believe you had volcanoes all around the earth going off and blowing up into the airs, miles up into the sky, all of the ash and all of the dust everywhere that brings the windows of heaven then open up. We don't have time to talk about water vapor canopy that surrounded the earth at that particular time. But it emptied down, earthquakes that shook and separated things, land masses falling, mountains rising up that weren't there before. It was just immediate. Well, notice, as the days of Noah were, so shall the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days of Noah were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage. They were just going about their daily business. They were going about doing things like they always do. And that's what it's going to be like when I return. There'll be no signs. There'll be no black cloud coming up and everybody running and getting themselves ready. It will happen, and then it's too late. Verse 39. And they knew not until the flood came and took them all away. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Then shall two be in the field. The one shall be taken, the other left. Two women shall be grinding at the mill. One shall be taken, and the other left. Watch therefore. Now watch this. For ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. Then he speaks a parable. And then he speaks a parable of the virgins. And he closes out with the same admonition. Well, the point's made, I believe. The signs that we read of in Matthew chapter 24 pointed to the destruction of Jerusalem, which took place in the year 70. These are not signs of the times that we see today that tell us of the second coming of Christ. Let's go to 2 Peter chapter 3 to wrap this up. And then we'll move on, unless somebody has some comments or some observations. 2 Peter chapter 3. And let's just look at verse 10, the opening of it. 2 Peter 3:10. But the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night, in which the heavens shall pass away with a great noise, the elements shall melt with a fervent heat, the earth also and the works thereof that are therein shall be burned up. Okay, the day of the Lord. This is talking about final judgment. You know, you see that phrase in the Old Testament often, the day of the Lord, the day of the Lord, the day of the Lord. It always refers to a judgment of God. But it doesn't always refer to final judgment. You have to put it in its context. I know this is final judgment. Why? Because all things will be burned up, and all the creation will be done away with. But notice, the day of the Lord, the day of judgment, this is final judgment, will come as a thief in the night. Okay. I've probably asked this here before, but I'm going to ask it again. Anybody ever had your house broken into? Anybody? You have, Pete? You have? Hayden? I'll pick on you then. Somebody broke in your house before? Why weren't you there waiting on them? No, man. They sent you a letter, didn't they? Did they not send you a letter say, Hayden Barnett, we will be there at such and such time? Did they not put a post-it note on your door so when you got there? Did they not, put up some kind of banner across your front yard and say, be ready because here's a sign showing that we're coming to break in and rob you? Didn't do that. Thief comes in stealthily when you're not expecting it. The day of the Lord will come that way when we're not expecting it, as a thief in the night. There will be no signs. Some people today say, we know the Lord's time of coming is at hand because of all the signs of the time. There's no such thing as the signs of the time of the second coming of Christ. If so, Peter's a false teacher. All right. We've belabored the point. Any comments on that? I think it's worthy to spend some time on it in as much as it is something that's discussed much today.
I think also when you look at the way they asked the question, they kind of ran two questions together, and it kind of is telling about what they thought. These men still thought that there was going to be an earthly kingdom. They ran these two questions together like it was going to be at the same time. There's no way God could destroy Jerusalem before the end of the world.
Okay, now, you make an excellent point that has to be emphasized here. In the city of Jerusalem is the city of what? It's the city of God. Right? Nothing's going to destroy the city of God. He's there. He's protecting it. In fact, look at Luke chapter 18, maybe. Let's see if it's Luke chapter 18. If not, somebody might be able to find it for me. No, it's not Luke chapter 18. There is an occasion in Luke, in one of the later chapters, where Jesus says, your house is left to you desolate. The admonition begins, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem. And he ends, your house is left to you desolate. And the point being made is this. Your city is left to you. God is not in it anymore. He will no longer protect your city. You'll have to defend it yourself. Now, to the Jewish mind, that was unbelievable. And these apostles were no different than any of the other Jews of their day, with the understanding and belief that the Messiah would bring an earthly kingdom and throw off the yoke of Rome, and the borders of the kingdom would be great as it was in the days of David and especially in the time of Solomon. Okay, what would bring down the temple? Only the end of the world would bring down the temple. And so when they ask the question, when will these things be? That their understanding, it has to be the end of the world that does this. When's that going to happen? And so I believe you're right. That's their mindset. And you see, we're going to say something else.
I was going to say, Jesus weeps over Jerusalem in Luke 19:41. And he talks about surround you, close you on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground. I don't know if that's what you were looking for.
No, it's Luke. It's Luke, I think maybe 17 somewhere. I tell you what, it's in Luke. Just read the book and you'll find it. All right, let's move on. And we have a lesson in humility. John chapter 13, verses 1 through 17. What do we have a record of there? What was the great lesson on humility that Jesus taught? John chapter 13. Okay, why would he do that? Why would he take time to wash their feet? Okay, it would be something that you would take with you, but why would you need to have that impression made? Be what? Okay, nothing is above you. You should be a servant. They didn't have the right attitude and mindset, so what attitude and mindset did they have? James?
If you want to be the first in the kingdom, you're going to have to be a servant.
Okay, let's look, going to Luke chapter 9, but then we'll jump back to John 13, okay? Luke chapter 9, and let's just look at verse 46. Luke chapter 9, verse 46. Then there arose a reasoning among them. Does anybody have something different than reasoning? A dispute? Okay. Who is the them? This is the 12. Okay, there arose a reasoning, a dispute. There's really kind of an argument, so to speak, here, or a debate. We'll say a debate among them. Which of who? Which of them should be greatest? This isn't a question about, and now they're asking who's going to be greatest in the kingdom, okay? And their expectation of the kingdom is an earthly kingdom. Acts chapter 1, verse 6, will thou at this time restore again the kingdom of Israel? Even after his death and resurrection, they're looking for an earthly kingdom, okay? So they're debating with one another, hey, which of us is going to be the greatest in the kingdom? You know, anytime he's kind of pulled just a few off to the side, it's been Peter, James, and John. Is it going to be one of them? Why should it be one of them? What's wrong with us? I think I should be great. Look, I've got this skill set, and I've got these talents. I should be great. And so there's this reason. This isn't the only time this takes place. There's one occasion where the mother of James and John comes to Jesus in the presence of all the apostles and says, when you come into your kingdom, have one of my sons on your left hand and one on your right hand. You think that went over well? John chapter 13. Now before the feast of the Passover, when Jesus knew that his hour was come, that he should depart out of the world unto the Father, having loved his own which were in the world, he loved them unto the end. And supper being ended, the devil having now put into the heart of Judas Iscariot, Simon's son, to betray him, Jesus, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, that he was come from God and went to God, he riseth from supper and laid aside his garments and took a towel and girded himself, that is, his clothing. They wore the longer robes. He pulled it up and tied his belt so that they wouldn't fall, it wouldn't drop down and hinder him from moving. Okay. He girded himself, and that's also the posture of the servant. And he poureth water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with a towel wherewith he was girded. No, now I got a question for you. If you were sitting at the table eating a meal with Jesus, and he gets up and begins to prepare, I mean, they have to know, okay, this is a preparation of what a servant's going to do to wash somebody's feet. And then he begins to starts washing feet, and you're sitting about 4 down, and he starts over here with that, and you're like, and he goes to, John, what are you going to do? Are you going to slide your shoes off and get yourself turned and set and ready to go? So when he gets you, say, hey, here you go. I've got myself ready. My feet are ready. Or are you going to be sitting there looking at each other like, what in the world is going on? Then cometh he to Simon Peter, and Peter saith unto him, Lord, dost thou wash my feet? Why are you doing this? The answer, because Peter, you and your fellow apostles have been debating who's the greatest among you. And in truth, I'm the greatest among you. And the reason I'm the greatest is because of my servant. Then answered Jesus and said unto him, What I do thou knowest not now, but thou shalt know hereafter. I'm teaching you something. I'm teaching you a lesson, Hayden, as you were right. I'm teaching you a lesson on humility. Why? Because you need it. Peter saith unto him, Thou shalt never wash my feet. Jesus answered, If I wash thee not, thou hast no part with me. Simon Peter saith unto him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head. Why, are your hands dirty, Peter? Is your head dirty? Jesus saith unto him, He that is washed needeth not save to wash his feet. I don't need to wash your hands. You already washed your hand before you ate. I don't need to wash your head. Your head's clean, but your feet aren't. But is clean every whit, and ye are clean, but not all. Well, he then begins to allude to the situation and circumstances with Judas. Nevertheless, the point we see is a lesson on humility. And why did he have to take time to teach the lesson? Because they each desire to be the greatest. And what is the key to promotion in the kingdom? Humility. Service. Humility. Okay. Any thoughts on that? We got just a couple of minutes. We'll see what we can get done here. Matthew, well, I'm giving the answer. Where do we find in the book of Matthew the beginning of or the institution of the Lord's Supper? I'll give you a clue. It's Matthew chapter 26, 21 through 28. Okay. Matthew chapter 26, 21 through 28. We won't elaborate on that. What is the Lord's Supper? What is it? It's a memorial. What is a memorial? What is the purpose of a memorial? Yeah, you see the word there. Memorial, memory. It's for the purpose of remembering, not reenacting. Okay? But for the purpose of remembering. Now, the bread and the fruit of the vine, what are they? What is the bread? Okay. Okay, but what does it symbolize? And the fruit of the vine? Now, what might be a word we would use? Represents. It's not literally the body, not literally the blood, but it represents. Have you ever heard it said it represents? That's the doctrine of transubstantiation. That the bread is, when it is put into your mouth by the priest, it becomes flesh. We know what trans means, right? From one, going from one to the other, substantiation, substance, it is transferring from one substance to another substance. And the Catholic Church would teach it is a representing of the sacrifice of Jesus, not a memorial of it. It also teaches, their doctrine also teaches that we have forgiveness of sins in the Lord's Supper. Be aware, we have a song that we sometimes sing that teaches that doctrine too. Might keep our ears open to that. Well, we don't have time. I think we're past our time. We'll Sunday morning we'll start with on lesson 10 from Gethsemane to the cross, and get what we can there, and maybe jump into 11. Appreciate the attention. Appreciate the comments. Yes, ma'am. Luke 13:34. Your city is left to you desolate.
O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the city that kills prophets with stones.
That's it.
Those who are sent to it. How often would I have gathered your children together as a hen gathers her brood under her wings, and you were not willing? Behold, your house is forsaken, and I tell you, you will not see me until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord.
Okay. That might be the passage I was looking for. I know that's the starting of it for sure. All right, we're dismissed.